In his commentary, Rashi has clearly linked the double Mishkan to the destruction of Bet HaMikdash number 1 and Bet HaMikdash number 2, and in the process rejecting the option that Pasuk 21 refers to the destruction of the Mishkan. This was primarily based upon the interpretation of Mishkan as Mashkon, a collateral, for which the Mishkan did not meet the test. Additional support for Rashi's thesis in rejecting the Mishkan comes from the fact that the Mashkon came about on account of the Avonotehem Shel Yisrael, and emphasis here is upon the word Yisrael. From the very outset, the Mishkan was a temporary situation that would eventually lead to a more permanent structure, the Beit HaMikdash. And therefore, from a macro perspective, it was only a matter of time before the Mishkan would be destroyed and or dismantled. From the micro level, however, one would take note of the details of this transition from Mishkan to Mikdash. We noted earlier that following the crossing of the Yarden, for 14 years the Mishkan remained at Gilgal. It then moved to Shiloh, and following a defeat by the Philistines, it was eventually reconstructed in Nov and then again in Gibeon. We also mapped the events of the 10th of ER 2870 and noted the four things that took place on that date, which came as a fulfillment of a prophecy made to Shmuel, in which God foretold of an event that would resonate and bring trepidation to the nation as a whole. That Shma'ah, the news of this event, Tetzilena Shtei Oznav. Of the four items listed, the death of Chofni and Pinchas, and also of their father, while unfortunate, were nevertheless not traumatic. Defeat at the hands of the Philistines was always a possibility. They could not really expect to remain victorious in perpetuity, and therefore, of the four items, the capture of the Aron HaKodesh would meet the test of Tetzilena Shtei Oznav. As such, it could be argued that the capture of the Aron HaKodesh, which ultimately led to the dismantling of Shiloh as a sanctuary, came as a result of the actions of Chofni and Pinchas, and is linked to the fact that Eli, as the Kohen Gadol, permitted the corruption of power to continue for many years. In the words of the text, Ki shofet ani et beito ad olam, I am on the verge of passing judgment against his entire household on account of be'avon asher yada. He was aware of the sin, the corruption that was taking place. V'lo kiha bahem, he did nothing to hold them back. In making the statement that the Churban of the Bet HaMikdash number 1 and Bet HaMikdash number 2 came on account of the collective guilt of Yisrael, the entire nation, Rashi is possibly offering additional textual support for his thesis that the Mishkan Mashkon collateral interpretation does not refer to the Mishkan, in that the destruction of the Mishkan is linked not to the collective guilt of the nation, but specifically to the sins of Eli and his two sons, leaving us with two options for the inclusion of what seemingly was a superfluous piece of information, the statement that the Churban came about, Al Avonotehem Shel Yisrael. One reading into the statement is that it comes to support the collateral argument, the Mashkon interpretation, and that the destruction hinged not upon a predetermined product life cycle of each of the respective Batei HaMikdash, thereby allowing for its future reinstatement in the Messianic era. An additional reading is that it comes to support Rashi's rejection of the Mishkan, in that the Mishkan was a result of the sins of Eli and his two sons, whereas the Mashkon, destruction of the temple, was linked to the collective sin of the entire nation.